Hello, everyone. I'm Wen. I'm the CEO of Smarking. We are a technology company based in San Francisco, working with parking and mobility leaders across the country. We're currently supporting 2,000 parking sites across North America. Our specialty is to help you to turn your parking data into business intelligence, dynamic pricing, and maximize your business results. So today, we're very fortunate to assemble a amazing panel around the globe with parking industry leaders from the UK, Australia, and China markets. I'll kick off the session with a brief review of what Smarking has been observing in terms of the COVID impact to the parking industry here in the US, as well as some of the latest recovery data. What you're looking at right now on the screen is a business intelligence tool we most recently released called Industry Benchmark. So Smarting enables real-time data insights based off more than 2,000 sites across North America. And a lot of our customers reached out to ask for anonymized high-level insights. So we released this product to essentially help people to understand two things, put things into perspective. One, what is the market trend on a national level and on a regional level in terms of year-over-year revenue changes, transaction changes, and occupancy. At the same time, we help our clients to benchmark the performance of their own location to the market. We can get into that shortly. But primarily, what we're looking at here is the market data, the year-over-year revenue changes for the entire North America region. And what we're looking at here is about 910 plus parking sites randomly selected from the entire data pool. When it comes to off-street parking, we look at both surface lots and garage, but you can break it down if you're interested. And we look at the transit parking on a monthly basis as an example here. So from a revenue standpoint, easily we can see before March, year over year, the revenue across the board was up. January was 15 or so percent. February was 20 or so percent. Business was really good. Now, I do want to make a disclaimer here that we do not represent the absolute truth across the board because the data pool is still fairly limited compared to the entire U.S. parking market. But I would say a majority of the locations within our data pool are likely performing slightly better than the rest of the locations in a way that, as you can imagine, people who spend money to invest in technology, typically, possibly, their locations are performing a bit better. So a little bit of disclaimer that our data is not completely unbiased. There is a little bit of bias there. But nonetheless, we can really see the trend on the market. Getting to March, mid of March, the pandemic outbreak happened, and immediately our industry got hit really, really hard. We experienced a 47.8% down in terms of revenue, and it really touched the valley point when it comes to April. Basically, 93% or 94% of the revenue was gone. We only had 6 or so percent of revenue left. After that, gradually, slowly but surely, we're coming back. And when it comes to last month, all the way to September, we were basically 56.9% down. Basically, we are at about 43 or so percent of same time period last year compared to 2019. So it's not good, I'd say. If we're interested in taking a look at the transaction, I'd say it's pretty much on the same level. Although transaction was only down at the valley point 86% compared to revenue 93%. And as of last month, we were down in terms of transaction volume 46%. So we passed that 50% half mark, half of the volume compared to 2019 mark. So this is nationwide what we're seeing. Our kind of sort of very simple view is likely even going into Q4 because of a lot of larger employers who are pushing for the coming back to workplace dates in next January. We had the hope after Labor Day, but clearly it's not happening. So maybe toward the end of the year, we're still looking at about just kind of sort of 50% of recovery. And the true recovery, hopefully the vaccine comes out early next year, and we can really see the recovery throughout Q1. Hopefully, let's say we get to 75%, and maybe by the end of Q2 or mid of next year, we get back to kind of sort of pre-pandemic normal. That's our hope. There's obviously no, let's say, guarantee per se. On the other hand, I thought maybe interesting to take a look at particular regions. So this chart we're looking at here is New York City. And basically, very interesting, there are region by region variations. We're also seeing some industry vertical differences, and there are also some trend that primarily online recovery is slightly faster, actually quite faster compared to offline. So if you're interested in more data, reach out to us, and we're happy to share more, or just have a discussion about industry and the benchmark in general. So back to New York, looks like, at least from the very limited data sample pool, actually before the pandemic, those locations we've had, again, this probably doesn't represent the entire New York. It's actually, we're seeing year over year a bit down when it comes to revenue. Again, so I'd say, disclaimer, there is bias in this data. But from a general trend standpoint, we can see that similarly, back in April, it really touched a valley point, down about 95%. We have only 5% left at the valley point in New York in industry. May was much worse than nationwide. June the same. But most recently, coming to September, we were only 37% down. So we're 63 or so percent up, which is good, better than majority of the rest of the country. Congratulations to New York. And hopefully we can see more recovery over time. 37% down is still quite a bit. We can take a quick look at the transactions. Transactions were 30% down, basically 70% up, which is good, but still a long way to go for us to come back. So for Chicago, before the pandemic, it was really good. April, we were at about 90% down. As of September, we were 52% down, so we're 48% up. Kind of sort of just a slightly better than national average. Let's take a look at the West Coast, LA. Lowest, we were at 4% as the last. That's October. Let's look at this September. September, we were 60% down, or less than 40% up. This is actually worse than nationwide, worse than national average. Similar when it comes to transactions. One last thing, let's take a look at Miami, because Miami was one of the recovered ones where value point, same 92% down, but as of September, but 31% down, so we're about 70% up, which is great. Congratulations to Miami, but still a long way to go for us to come back completely. With our capability, you can also see on street for especially municipalities. We don't have to get into the details here, but I'd say if you're interested in learning more about understanding the market dynamics here in the US or across North America and benchmark your location, we can rank your location in terms of your particular location compared to the entire region as well as nationwide. What is the trend? But yeah, all in all, I'd say on a higher level here for us in the US market, what we're observing is across the board, about 40% of recovery. Some of the regions are slightly ahead, such as Chicago. Some of the others are recovered rather better in the most recent days, like New York and Miami. Others are along the same lines as in LA and so on. All right, with that, I'll ask our panelists to share their insights, their observation on what has been the impact when it comes to COVID-19 and what are some of the latest stats they have in their particular regions. All right, cool. So thank you, Anthony, very much for joining us today. As an introduction, I would love to just let you tell us a little bit more about you, your company, and the parking industry in general in UK and in Europe.
Sure. Well, firstly, Wen, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you. So just to get a quick introduction about myself, my name is Eskinazi. I'm CEO of JustPark, a parking mobility company based in the United Kingdom. I guess in terms of what we're seeing in the industry, I guess obviously pre-lockdown, probably like every other market, a booming industry, just sort of trying to find it in terms of electrification and sort of other future mobility services and kind of what our role is, especially in the market, which is obviously very conscious of sort of decarbonization of the economy and the impact parking has there. But when COVID hit and obviously the UK lockdown, just like most of the rest of the world, the parking sector was hit probably disproportionately hard. We know that, like a hotel room, a parking space that isn't utilized is lost revenue forever. That can never be purchased again, unlike clothing, except in the future. And so, the support the UK parking sector got from the government was relatively limited. I think we were, the major operators over here were because they didn't get something called business rate relief. So they were still having to pay as if their business was still operating. A lot of the parking lots were actually used as testing centres, and so despite effectively providing their real estate to support the COVID relief effort, that wasn't really taken into account. And so, not only were we losing all the income as an industry, we also weren't getting the support from government. But also, parking is a grudge purchase. A lot of people feel, the parking sector doesn't have a positive brand image, and so it was hardly a vote winner to give the parking industry any sort of any credit or helping us out. So the parking sector isn't in great shape. With less and less people wanting to use public transportation, you'd think that actually, okay, well, more and more people are getting into their cars, but the problem is, as soon as schools went back, congestion got really bad, and so people who were maybe driving before the schools went back are now realizing that actually my commute is now, instead of being 20 minutes, half an hour, it's now an hour and a half. And so a lot of people now who were driving when the lockdown eased are now back to working from home. We're back to sort of quasi lockdown in the UK in terms of how many people you can socialize. The recommendation is to still work from home. And so, and also it didn't help that the UK government increased the congestion charge, which anyone who doesn't understand is in London, the central part of London, you have to pay £15. That's what, $25-ish or $20 to even drive into central London. And they extended that not just to 10 p.m. Monday to Friday, but they also added it on weekends. And so just driving into town now is extremely expensive. And a lot of the major parking lot operators have plenty of sites in central London. And so it's kind of like a double, triple whammy where the sector was just, hit really, really hard. And, a lot of how they're reacting is there's only so much you can do. What JustPark does is, we've got a marketing platform to help operators, receive reservations and pre-bookings, and we also offer an on-demand service for sort of on-street and off-street payments. And so we're working with a number of them to obviously drive different type of channels, different demand, different types of customers to fill up their car parks. But the whole industry, and that includes the major parking operators, but anyone operating in the parking sector will be seeing much less demand than they have previously. There has been a change in that, where certain inventory, certain parking spaces were in high demand pre-COVID, they are like around train stations and commuter areas. They've been decimated. The demand for those spaces has sort of evaporated. Demand in other areas has gone up because people are now saying, right, I'm now going to drive to work, or I'm going to drive before I'd have to take a bus or a train or tube. We're seeing a lot more demand for long-term parking, where people are saying, okay, I want a season ticket because I'm now driving to work every day. I don't want to have to circle the block, looking for parking. I want a guaranteed space every day and some consistency. So, we're seeing a lot more sort of season tickets and monthly payments and monthly contracts. So the balance of demand, where both geographically and duration, has changed quite significantly. And obviously, we're adapting, our marketing and where we're acquiring supply, based on those changes we're seeing. So it's all quite interesting. It's very stressful, and we're having to look at the data, react to it, and be quite lean in the way we're thinking about overcoming the challenges that COVID brings. And obviously, we're still really uncertain as to how long this will last. Are the changes in consumer behavior and consumer demand, both geographically and duration, etc., are these semi-permanent? Are they permanent? Does the profile of for example, a JustPark customer, has that just fundamentally shifted now? So we need to change the way we talk about our proposition and the value we bring. All of that is still up in the air. And I think if we're thinking about it, and I believe most people in the sector are also thinking about it as well. So it's I guess what I'm saying about the UK sector, I imagine is very similar across other sectors around the world.
Indeed, and you touched on a lot of very fascinating items, such as consumer behavior changes, such as how the industry is reacting to it, and also the policy impact. If we dive one level deeper into that, when it comes there, I'm sure there's both similarity and uniqueness, such as the $20 of charge or £15 of charge when it comes to driving into London. So if we dive one level deeper here, Anthony, from a numbers standpoint, what would you say from the beginning of the pandemic, early this year, up until now, we're getting into October, volume-wise, pre-pandemic, entire UK parking industry, what is the rough size, number of transactions, or like revenue, whatnot? What is the inventory like? And from a percentage of recovery or the changes throughout these past 3 quarters, what has it been? And so far, right now, where are we in terms of recovery compared to the pre-pandemic level?
I guess through the conversations I've had with companies across the sector, during the height of lockdown, we were talking about 90% plus. That may have changed slightly for those who sort of were maybe over-indexed in season ticket, because again, a lot of people weren't willing to give up those contracts. But I guess where we are right now, I guess indicatively, I think we're still looking at between 20 and 40% lower. Again, it really depends on where that parking lot is located. If you're in and around office building, in a sort of desirable place to work, where people are actually where maybe the demographic is a bit younger, so people are don't have very large homes, and so they don't really want to work from home. They want to get back into the office because that's where a big part of their social life is. So the West End of London, I imagine, has a lot more people traveling to work than those maybe in the city or Canary Wharf, where again a lot of bankers and the larger law firms are located, which I've heard is like a ghost town. So I think if you've got a parking lot in Canary Wharf, you'll see your revenues may be down 60, 70, 80%, whereas in the West End, it's only 10%, 20%, because more and more people are driving into the office. I think you will see quite a difference there. But on the other hand, I guess we're, from a JustPark perspective, we, as of August, we started seeing, I think early August, we were year-on-year growth. So we were back to year-on-year growth. The impact that we were able, the position JustPark operates in, both in terms of on-demand payments, both on-street and off-street, but also the sort of uniqueness of our product can offer, guaranteed parking spots close to wherever you want to go, giving drivers the peace of mind, especially drivers who weren't traditionally, commuting via a car. We were people were looking for that peace of mind. They didn't want to circle the block. They didn't want to. They were getting into their cars to commute for the time. So we're fortunate in obviously playing in that space within the sector. But also, as I mentioned before, a lot of the parking lot operators, be it the major parking lot operators or commercial offices or someone else who just wants to sort of monetize their underutilized parking real estate, especially as people aren't returning to work, they were in touch with us in their droves saying, right, we have this underutilized real estate, we're aware of JustPark and what you do, would love to work with you. So we kind of saw benefits of COVID in that it accelerated the digitization of the industry, and kind of made up for some of the lost demand or change in demand that we've obviously seen in the market.
That's amazing. So wow. So essentially, the recovery, it sounds like, of parking, to a certain extent largely depends on the geographic location area and what would people, the demographics there. There's a huge variation. And when it comes to your observation, it's pretty clear online as well as regardless on demand or reservation, more reservation is already recovered to a certain extent, beating 2019 numbers, given the consumer behavior change. It's kind of sort of a mega trend in the industry. So then, Anthony, my question comes to, what is your anticipation or forecast in terms of recovery toward the end of 2020 and coming to 2021? What are some of the major trends you think that we should anticipate when it comes to, if we look forward in the coming days and quarters?
So again, speaking from what I'm seeing in a lot of the on-street parking real estate is being repurposed faster. So the acceleration of a change in curbside usage has taken place. Maybe something that would have taken 3, 4, 5 years has happened in 3, 4, 5 months, and that's for a number of reasons. Firstly, to expand the pavement or sidewalk to enable social distancing. The very swift legalization of certain micro-mobility models. So electric scooters were actually illegal in the UK, have just been legalized during the lockdown, because they see it as a safe mode of transportation, which obviously is safe in a COVID environment. And also a huge investment and expansion of cycle lanes, cycle routes, and investment in the cycling sector. And so, on a lot of that parking, and again, and the other thing is obviously because of the introduction of low emission zones, higher penalties, obviously, for entering the central London area, the congestion charge. What I feel that will also do, and also there's some in the UK in April, government introduced some significant tax breaks for any company to provide electric fleets, fully electric, to their employees. And so what I think is going to happen, and this will have accelerated because of COVID, is a much faster adoption of electric vehicles, investment in electric vehicle infrastructure, increase in usage of micromobility, and therefore an acceleration in cleaner, greener modes of transportation. And I think the parking will have to adapt much quicker than it was planning to in terms of adopting the appropriate electric vehicle charging infrastructure, making space parking available potentially to micromobility. So, be it mobility hubs or whatever name you want to give them. All of that has just been a lot of the parking operators, especially those who are struggling and maybe thinking about, right, how do we start thinking about repurposing some of our assets to support these other mobility services, including electrification. So
that's really,
I think that.
That's really fascinating. I wouldn't have thought of that because of the pandemic, because all of the policy changes, there will be actually an acceleration of the electric vehicle and therefore the charging infrastructure, and therefore impact the parking. That will happen a lot faster than before. These are really fascinating. Now, when it comes to your recommendation or advice to industry peers in the UK, in Europe, in the US, around the globe, what would you say are the most important things you would recommend industry leaders to pay attention to?
what I've noticed since lockdown is organizations seem much more open to collaborating. I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but I think the UK market has suffered in terms of not, business development partnerships between organizations within the sector.
Yes.
Everyone tries to do everything themselves. And what I've seen is very much a realization saying, our sector goes far saying there's an existential crisis, but there's definitely, people are rethinking their business models. People are worried about cash flow. They're worried about, how long is this going to last? There's a vaccine, but how long, even once there's a vaccine, you're distributing it. We're talking about 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 beyond. The parking sector, as we know, is, yes, you've got your parking lot operators who operate in city centers and serve commuters, but the ones who serve, large events, they may not, I don't know what, again, in the US, I'm not sure if crowds are back, but in the UK, fans will not be going to sports stadiums probably until next summer at the earliest. So all the parking lots around the sports stadiums, what are they doing for the next, 6, 12 months? Similar with airports, airport travel, air travel has just been decimated. The airlines are being saved by the government because they're viable businesses, but just not at the moment. And so all the parking lots around the airports are struggling. And so, what we're seeing is, they're rethinking their business models. They're rethinking about what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. Rather than doing everything themselves, they are looking for partners to help, opportunities. How do, the acceleration of digital adoption of technology within the sector. Again, similar to what I said about sort of electrification and micromobility, I think that the industry will accelerate 3 to 5 years in terms of adoption of new technology because it's forced to.
I see. So essentially, you're saying the history trend is set that the digitization and electrification of parking is happening right now, and it's being accelerated. While the environment is rough, the people who can think of collaboration, who can be embracing that, adopt technologies a lot faster instead of trying to do everything themselves, but rather be open to partnership, open to collaboration, to work with companies like JustPark, who has a lot of advanced technologies when it comes to contactless parking and so on, basically to take advantage of the trend instead of being pushed and being pressurized by the trend to survive and then to thrive. Is kind of a high level takeaway. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anthony. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the details, I will ask you to just give the audience a little bit about yourself.
My name is Jiang. I'm the president of Sunsea Parking Group, the largest parking operator in China. Right now, we have managed about 300,000 parking base, and half of it is what we call that we have the right to collect the revenue, and we have half. Our business is service-based, and we are serving very, very large clients such as Shanghai Hongqiao Airport Terminal 2, which is one of the biggest airports in China, and we are also serving the amazing, the famous tower, the CCTV tower, which is the signature building in Beijing. Regarding our own asset-based business, it has been growing from almost 0 to close to 150,000 days within 3 years. This year, we're seeing another big surge in our business volumes. We're probably going to cross 500,000 parking days by the end of this year. Do you want me to talk about the market as well?
Market, yeah.
Give people some a rough idea of what China market looks like.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. China is probably the biggest market in terms of parking worldwide. Based on our estimate, the number of parking bays, that you can actually collect fee is around 100 million. And imagine that if we only take 5% of that market, will be probably the number 1 parking operators worldwide. The parking fee level is very low right now, and we're catching up. We see some rapid increase in parking fee in tier 1 cities such as Beijing and Shanghai, and also the tier 2 cities are catching up very, very quickly. Right now, there are some government control in the parking fee level, but we expect that to be released very, very soon. And there is a huge issue with imbalance of parking, the number of vehicles and number of parking bays available. Our estimate is that right now it's 1 car to 0.5 parking bays, so it's a huge issue right now in China. That's the brief view of the market.
Thank you very much, Tony. So with that, now we're in pretty much the end of quarter 3 of 2020. Obviously, every country in the world all got impacted by COVID-19 pretty heavily, but clearly the recovery is different. Could you share with us a little bit about what you were seeing in the China parking market in terms of recovery so far? How has it been?
So as I said, in February it's very bad. March and April continue climbing up until June, where we have the second round around Beijing, and then the government tightened the policies a little bit.
Yeah.
And start from July, everything went to normal, and we just see steady climbing of the traffic and our revenues.
That is amazing. So on a weekly basis, as you said, Tony, pretty much by the end of July to August, as you said, it's back to pre-COVID level, both from a traffic or activity standpoint and revenue. So does this include both transient drive up as well as commuter monthly parking, both of them?
Yeah, it's everything.
That is amazing. So does this mean everything is really normal now, basically everything in China?
I don't see any difference.
Okay.
So I think people are traveling, and airports are actually getting busy right now. So, but I mean, I have some segment data later on, but basically the hospitals are not really good, and I think there are only a couple of segments like schools, depending on whether or not they're open. So only some, a few segments we still see issues, but overall we're fine.
I see. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, take us through actually on a regional basis from different industry sectors. What are some of the observations you've had so far? It would be really amazing.
Yeah, and this one where there are a little bit difference in performance based on the level cities. You probably know the tier 1 cities. We're talking about five largest cities in China. Actually, the tier 1 city traffic volume stays at 94%. And actually the tier, what we call the 1.5, those are the cities like Hangzhou, Nanjing, Wuhan, cities like that. And tier 2 also they perform a little bit better than tier 1. The reason is that in tier 1 cities, there is still a bit of policies and controls, and in tier 1.5 and tier 2, those are pretty relaxed.
I see. So essentially, and this data is the latest Q3 data, or this is year to date?
It's current data. It's basically it's August.
Okay, August 2020.
In September, we still don't have we still don't have the summary yet.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, we're still in
tier 3 cities and below, the traffic's coming up, but you need to ignore those data because we don't have that many projects in smaller cities. Yeah,
of course. I see a big difference in terms of traffic flow and income for tier 3 and below. Between essentially the activity is up, but not necessarily income.
Exactly. That's a very good question. I think one of the things that we also measure is the length of stay. It looks like the people are more target oriented than when they go to when they do parking. They probably go and buy stuff and then leave quickly.
I see. Got it. So is it fair to say, out of this chart, essentially my understanding of the major difference between different tiers for cities is really the population. So essentially, it sounds to me that the really larger cities, pretty much everything is normal, but there are still certain control from the policy or the local governments and so on. But
when you go to a hospital, the security guys will ask you to present your QR code, and when it's green, you can go. If not, you just stay there and do a lot of explanations.
This is extremely insightful. So how about then, Tony, when it comes to different property types, industry sectors? Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. Where, the transportation hub we manage, probably less 10. So I should indicate that maybe the overall traffic data it's just our data. So it doesn't represent the entire China situation.
Sure,
actually, the transportation hub is doing very, very well right now. Shopping malls are basically back to normal. Office.
That is amazing. That is very amazing. So, okay.
Supermarket, hotel, everything. Scenery spa. Hospital and schools are a little bit, down. But, schools, of course, we understand. Most of them are still not open yet.
Got it. So essentially, it sounds to me that the COVID really hit back in February. Essentially, school was not open throughout the entire spring and summer, and then essentially after the summer vacation, essentially schools are about to open in September across the country.
Right.
Okay.
Now we expect the schools to be, still below the target because they are, even if the schools are open, there are some restrictions for non-school related people to go into that school.
Got it.
So visitors are, there are restrictions for visitors.
I see. So this is again very, very insightful. One question I have here, a couple of questions here. So when it comes to one of the sector, you commented on office, and it sounds like it's back to normal already. So here in the U.S., the expectation from many employers is because of the COVID, people's perception of work from home generally changed. And many employers expect actually even after the COVID pandemic is gone, the habits, or let's say the work mode, is going to change. And there is a general expectation in the parking world also. The monthly parking, as we know, is probably no longer the same anymore. Is that completely not the case in China?
It's a little bit weird. It's very, very different. I would say it's completely different because from our side, we've observed a huge surge in volume in monthly parking requirements, and those guys are abandoning public transportations for safety. So we've seen some volume increase in monthly parking, especially in tier 1 and tier 2 cities.
I see. So essentially, people are still going to work every day, Monday through Friday.
Exactly.
There's no work from home hybrid. Say I will go to the office for a couple of days a week. There's no such a thing.
Well, this part of the world is very different. People probably in the U.S. have more choices, but here, you have to. We have policies. We have that you have to obey.
Right.
So when the company is open, you go to your office.
I mean, from a parking standpoint, that's great. That's fantastic. Because that is one of the major shifts we're here seeing in the U.S. market, and people are worried that, okay, now our monthly parkings are gone. How are we gonna? That used to be half of the business. So obviously there are concerns all around. Then another question I have is about shopping malls, because the expectation here in the U.S. is since the pandemic hit, the business for online purchase has gone up significantly, and the businesses in those industries have benefited significantly. But when it comes to retail, when it comes to let's say the sales in the physical infrastructures, it's much less and much lower. Even some of the shopping malls are back open. It's still not as good as pre-pandemic. What are you seeing in terms of shopping malls? Why is it not the case that the online platforms are also booming in China market?
In the past, maybe China market, online giants are very, very big and they're powerful, and we probably have seen them growing in the past 10 years. And basically, the competition, the way the competition between online and physical world is already there, and I think it's very clear that people who want to go to shopping malls are still going because go there for fun, to meet your friends. So it's all social activities. There are less and less branded shopping. The only thing that right now the shopping malls are still having some issues is movie theaters. Although all of them are opened, basically there's a lack of good content. So people go there and and they don't know what to see because there are not good movies coming out.
I see. Wow, that is really a completely different world. So you're telling me essentially shopping mall pretty much is no longer about brand shopping or purchasing. It's really an experience. People are going there for fun. For
1/3 of them are restaurants, and the other 1/3 of them are like barber shops, stuff like that, movie theaters.
Oh God.
There's some English training facilities. There's some training, special trainings for kids.
Yes, and it sounds like people do have a life. Not like we're still all shelter in place still in San Francisco. It's
we live in cities, and Chinese people are like gathering, and they like to have dinner with friends probably more frequent than the Westerners.
So far, pretty much, at least from a life perspective, from a work perspective, from the parking industry perspective, things are back to normal, or that we're even beating 2019's number. So, what is your expectation for the rest of the year, as well as for 2021?
I don't know. I just hope there's no another round of virus hit, especially right now the international flights are increasing. So Chinese people are worried that once it there's one loophole and the entire thing explode. So that's one worry that we have. We need to watch out also the vaccine development. It seems that by the end of this year there will be something on the market that people can test. So overall next year I don't think I would worry too much about it.
Got it. So essentially you're saying, although there are still uncertainty because of the increasing international flights, as well as we still don't have a vaccine yet, but likely toward the end of the year. So we still need to try to watch carefully. But assuming, let's say, no holes in the system, things just, we pass the time safely, and vaccine come out and take a little bit of time for us to get the vaccine, then would you expect toward the end of the year, the numbers still continue to go up, basically parking market continue to boom in a way?
Yeah, I think there's also a psychological change within people, and more people are basically saying, don't worry about it, just spend your money, enjoy the moment. Who knows? So people, I think people are starting to spend a lot. And if you go to Hainan and if you go to Sunsea and Haikou airports, you see the people, the luxury goods that they're selling, they're basically sold out within like 20-30 minutes.
Wow. So you're saying the pandemic's impact to pretty much everybody is actually made people wanted to spend money more because you got to live in the moment.
Yeah.
Oh my.
You China economic data as a consumption actually, I think actually increased by 6.5% versus last year, similar time period.
Wow. So putting it into academic word, we're talking about consumer confidence, right? So essentially, Wow, that is amazing, and that sounds good to parking, because if you go anywhere, you're gonna have to park your car. That is amazing. That is amazing. So, with all of the what you have experienced this year, what you have all observed, and what your anticipation toward the end of the year next year, what would be some of the recommendations you have for industry peers?
My thinking, my thought is very simple. I mean, we can fight the virus, and we can fight the government. We can fight the policies. So there's very little for us to do except cutting costs to make sure that you stay afloat, and also try to convince your investors to, if you're in trouble, try to convince them this is a legit business, and they should put more money to support to keep the company afloat. I think the only two things that we can do.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. So before we jump off for this session, one more question about when it comes to your observation of before and post pandemic. Have you observed other, let's say, unique or outstanding changes in terms of the people's need when it comes to parking? Were there any other major changes?
I would point out to only one change that we noticed. Right now, the new car sales volume is up.
Would you say that's a shift from public transportation?
I would not absolutely say so, but I think people need a vehicle in case there's emergency.
So right now we're still in the middle of this whole pandemic, and a lot of let's say voices are about how consumers expect to experience to pay parking differently, meaning that consumers may not want to touch, let's say, cash, credit card even. Do you see that in the China market as well, or that has already happened in terms of the mobile transformation?
Yeah, that's a very good observation. Where my expectation is that in the US, the technology application would grow a lot faster. I think when you should understand that in China, this is not an issue anymore. We're basically in our parking lots, they are roughly 90%, over 90% are online payment using WeChat or Alipay or other payment method. It's all cashless, so we're more advanced in online payment. But that requires some policy changes in terms of consumer privacy, stuff like that. That's something that I think it will take a while for the US to reach that level of penetration in online payment. But overall I think the facilities, the investment in online platform would grow very, very rapidly. And I advise all the parking management companies to observe that and to accept that and to study that and to basically to watch the trend.
Thank you, Tony. So pretty much for all the facilities that you see, Sunsea is managing, 90+% are already online. This is a wake-up call for, in my view, the U.S. industry peers here. How important advanced technologies, and we should embrace them ASAP. There's no way to wait around anymore. This is really amazing. Thank you so much, Tony. I really appreciate you spending time with me and sharing some of the very great insights here. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Stuart, thank you very much for joining us today. Now, could you share with us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Wen, thanks first of all for the opportunity. As you said, my name is Stuart Norman. I'm the CEO of Parking Australia, and Parking Australia is the peak body for the parking industry in Australia, and it encompasses all aspects of parking. I've been with the organisation now for a bit over 18 months, and I have absolutely no problem and thoroughly enjoy representing the parking industry in Australia. Now, as an industry, we have, I'll probably share some statistics here with you, so it's much easier for me to clarify that. Now, just to give everyone a bit of an overview of the Australian parking market, there are about 20 million registered motor vehicles in Australia, and 3/4 of those are passenger vehicles. That doesn't include what we would call dual cab utes or dual cab SUVs, or pickups, as you would say in the US. So that actually is not included in that 75%. So you can imagine there is a good 18 million vehicles that are in the parking market in Australia. That's pretty high percentage when you think we only have a population of 25 million, yet we have 20 million registered vehicles. That's almost one vehicle per person, and that's everyone. That's a lot of motor vehicles. Now, to get to a little bit of what that looks like in terms of revenue, I've broken it up into this pre-COVID revenue, because trying to work out what post-COVID revenue or even current COVID revenue is, we'd be guessing, given that there are so many different stages. In Australia, we're still not out of it, given that Melbourne, our second largest city, is still undertaking the world's longest lockdown. But if you look at pre-COVID revenue, off-street car parking, private off-street car parking in Australia is about 1.5 billion Australian dollars. Airport parking about 1 billion. Now, local government, I've got that's pretty much on-street. It does include a little bit of off-street, and it does include fees and fines, and that's about 1.2 billion. Universities, shopping centres, and entertainment facilities such as casinos, convention centres, sporting facilities is about 350 million. Of the 4.5 billion, conservatively 2.5 billion of that is concentrated in our two largest cities, being Melbourne, Sydney and Melbourne. And if you include those 5 largest population centres that I showed you, of those 5, that would clearly account for 4 billion of that 4.5 billion. So it's very concentrated in what the revenue comes from in Australia.
So just to clarify, for local government's parking income, that does not include tax or levies. It's really just direct fees and fines through the parking assets owned by the city. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So that's mainly on-street parking. Some local government areas have some off-street, but it's not the predominant revenue earner for them. It's mainly on-street parking, which in Sydney and Melbourne equates to somewhere around, say, $6 an hour, and obviously there's some time to that. In Sydney and Melbourne, approximately half of their revenue is fines.
Oh,
they take half of their fees, half of the fees at the meter or through the app, or however the motorist is going to pay, and then that's make just as much, maybe sometimes in other years more than they make from the fees from fines.
That makes sense. Now, one of our topics today is to learn from industry thought leaders like yourself about the COVID impact to parking across the all over the world. When it comes to the Australian parking market, could you share with us a little bit what has been your observation in terms of the COVID impact to the industry in Australia?
The differences in the country from Melbourne to Perth are completely different. And as I said earlier, Melbourne is currently experiencing the world's longest lockdown. It's been going for about 100 days, where people such as myself have only been allowed to go out of our house for 1 or maybe 2 hours a day. And given that today in Melbourne there was only 12 new cases, and you've got over 5 million people shut up in their houses.
Wow.
So we've had 2 waves in Australia. From March we had the first wave, and that was sort of went to stage 1, where major events were closed, big gatherings of people were closed. It escalated very quickly through to stage 2 and then to stage 3. So to put that into usage numbers, and let's go with our largest markets of Southeast Queensland, or Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, where you would have off-street usage usually in excess of 95%. 95%. That really quickly dropped in some of our capital cities to 10% or less.
That's very similar to what we experienced here back in April in states across the country.
It was interesting that on that 13th of March, so from the 13th of March to, say, for the next 2 weeks to the 29th of March, people were still going to work and avoiding public transport like crazy. So those 2 weeks, very good weeks for the parking industry. But very quickly, from the 29th of March, everyone in major capital cities started working from home. So April was terrible. And then, as you said, things gradually opened up. But that gradual, let's take Melbourne out, that gradual is still only gradual. We are not back to pre-COVID levels. Sydney might only be having 5 cases a day, but the majority of the office workforce are still from home.
I see. Wow. So it sounds like on one hand, there are variations among different, if we're talking about the top 5 markets, which represent more than 90% of the entire parking industry in Australia, there are differences among different markets. But across the board, the case is no city has gone back to the pre-COVID situation yet.
Well, actually, I can say one. One definitely has. Perth,
okay.
which is on the far west coast, they would be back to almost full, if not almost, they are at full capacity and have been for a number of weeks.
That's amazing.
So that is amazing. People are. So the West Australian government, and West Australia is an enormous part of the country and so far excluded from everywhere else, that they've locked their own borders like a country. They've locked their own borders from the other states, and they have since March. And they're pretty much COVID free, but people will still not go back onto public transport. So for them, their parking is back at pre-COVID levels. When I did talk about that impact, we're mainly talking about just the off-street and maybe on-street markets, but they are they're not having major events, so there's no football. Universities aren't back anywhere near to what they were, and airports, which is $1 billion in revenue, you may as well just wipe that billion away, because first of all, Australia's taking very few flights in. We're not allowed to leave the country. The federal government will not let us leave the country. And in most states, there's been border lockdown, so people can't fly interstate either. So literally take that airport market and wipe it off.
I see. Wow. So essentially, okay, you're saying from a industry sector standpoint, there's no international flights, and even local flights are restricted. Basically, different parts of the country basically completely locked down. So airport parking revenue is pretty much gone since March.
Since March, yeah.
Okay. And how about when it comes to office? You're saying, is it the case across the board people are all still working from home, so office parking activities are not back yet? Or you say areas like Perth or West Australia is a lot better because people are going to work and they're driving and parking. Is that the case?
Well, if you take Perth, they are full to the brim and people are going to work. But it's not to the same levels of going, they're not all going back to work, but because of the fear of COVID, they're not taking public transport.
I see. So it's really kind of sort of the transient visits, not necessarily just the workforce, because of the shift from public transportation to a certain extent help the parking. So that's why basically Perth is a little bit kind of sort of close to the pre-COVID level.
Yeah, it would be the workforce that has got back to Perth, which is why it's full.
Got it. I see.
Definitely the workforce in Perth, and to some extent it's the workforce in Brisbane.
I see. So airport's gone. That's close to a quarter or just a shy of a quarter. And you said the events are not back. That's $300 million. And you said entertainment or so shopping malls, that's another $500 million. Are still not back yet, basically at the lowest level since March, pretty much.
And the local governments, and still the case in some areas, took charging and took enforcement away. They're not allowed to enforce. They're not even allowed to enforce time. And Sydney and Brisbane and these capital cities, for a period of time, and none of those councils charged for on-street parking.
So one more question over here, just to do a comparison between Sydney and Melbourne, Stuart. Looks like you said Sydney occupancy is kind of sort of not too bad, it's 60%, but Melbourne is below 10%. Is that the current data, or that was the lowest point? What makes these two areas different? Is it just the cases, or what is making that huge? That's 50% of difference. Still
so there was a major second wave in Melbourne, which the rest of the country did not have. So you've almost got to take Melbourne out of it. As I said, still in lockdown. Will be in lockdown at least for another month. Sydney is gradually improving, but for the parking industry to do well, we need occupancy rates. We need occupancy rates of 90 to 100%.
So this is extremely insightful, extremely helpful for us to understand, okay, what has been impact from COVID to the Australia park industry in different regions, in different sectors of the industry. are there other elements in terms of the impact you would like to share with the audience here?
Yeah,
or
sure. So the Australian market, this is where Parking Australia's industry body have been the most active. So lockdowns have been the biggest government policy that has affected usage. But there's some other policies at different levels of government which really hurt the industry as well. And let me go into those. So there was the national government wanted to bring in some rental or tenancy relief for businesses. And they brought that in for businesses that had a turnover of not less than $50. I've got on that slide, it's $50 million. And so what that means is car park operators, while the turnover might be large, the profit is not, because if it's a management agreement, they'll collect all the revenue and then redistribute. So that decision really hurt the industry, that we didn't get any real industry-wide rent relief or lease relief. On top of that, we have some state-based parking levies, which are all under the guise of trying to reduce congestion. So in Sydney, 120 million, in Melbourne, it's 100 million, Perth, that's 60 million. Now, we didn't get any real relief from those other than recently for Melbourne, we got 25% off that. In Sydney, we got changes in deferment of payment, and similar to that in Perth, they couldn't get decisions around deferring the payment.
With that, sort of, what would you say is your perspective on toward the end of this year, the last quarter of 2020, and coming to 2021? What is your anticipation of the recovery? How is that going to look like for parking in Australia?
Well, it was funny when it coming to the end of the first wave. We were all thinking new beauty. This will be a good second half of the year, but the second wave in Melbourne has put a real dampener, big time, on our second largest market, but also on the country as a whole. So we would think that towards the end of this year, we will see uplift in nearly every market other than Melbourne. Well, we will see hopefully an uplift in Melbourne, but we will see nearly every other market go back to somewhere just short of normal, and that would be good. But that's really only talking about the off-street market. We're not talking about universities or entertainment. We don't see that there'll be really any events in the country at all this year.
How about airports?
Airports, we don't see that there'll be any real. Airports, I think you're looking towards the middle of next year to see any significant improvement. And we would say by for the first quarter of next year, we would think that nearly all inner city, central business district areas would be, by the end of the first quarter of next year, back to being close to 100%.
It sounds to me you're saying essentially the events, the universities, the airports probably will be back next year, not this year. But toward the end of this year, regular off-street parking, except maybe Melbourne, is still going to be impacted a little bit more, but all the others would be just shy of the normal way.
The tough one here, being in the Southern Hemisphere, is that we're going into summer, and our summer holidays begin, at Christmas time. And so the end of December and all of January is our most quiet time. So while we would love to say, yes, December will be, I think that, December will be great. I think what you'll find is that it won't be till the start, when people come back to work in 2021 after their summer break, that we will see, that's when we'll see the improvement.
I'm seeing a picture of what you were describing here in terms of there will be difference among different industry sectors. There is going to be, we would need to take time. But I'm glad to hear that, and I'm encouraged to hear that toward the end of this year, maybe post the summer break for you guys, that you see many areas of the parking would actually recover toward the pre-pandemic level. Now, before we move on to the last of the section, Stuart, I would love to have your input on your recommendation for industry peers when it comes to either asset owners or operators, when it comes to, facing the continued challenge and come out of this pandemic together soon.
Sure.
But before that, one last thing: what is your kind of sort of outlook or view on the commuter parking or the conventional monthly parking when it comes to the workforce when they return?
Okay.
How do you what is your thinking?
So across the industry, parking habits have changed, and it pretty much goes with the change in society. So, you know, once upon a time, there would be individuals in a family that would have the same routine to go into the office, would go there 5 days a week in the same car spot, and that would be a permanently monthly parker. But lives change, and the way that we live our lives, and I'm sure Australia's not any different here, but people don't do the same thing all 5 days of the working week. You know, they might share the school drop off on a day or pick up between parents, because both parents, you know, are now working. So some days I'll drive, sometimes I have to leave early, sometimes I won't, sometimes I'll take public transport. So, you know, that tradition of banking on a monthly parker where they park every day in that park all the time is not happening. So we're calling them hybrid parkers, the people who will take public transport one day and park the next. And the percentage of hybrid parkers is growing quite rapidly. People's lives are different now than what they once were, and I think that that's only going to increase now that also people have got used to working from home.
Yeah.
And workplaces have got used to people working from home.
Yeah.
Not to say that people are not going to go to work, people will, but I don't think that people will book that monthly car spot, go to their office every day in the same way, every day of the month that they once did.
It sounds like you're saying even before the pandemic, there is already a growing population with the hybrid parking mode or more of a flexible parking mode. And you're saying after this pandemic, your anticipation of how workforce go back is it's not going to be a complete clear cut that everybody all of a sudden all go back Monday through Friday. That's not going to be the case, right?
That is not going to be the case, and you've got major corporations in Australia that have already said that the way that people have worked in the past is not the way that people are going to work in the future.
Wow.
It's going to be quite interesting to see how this post-COVID, the travelling habits of people and will work. It's going to be very interesting. And as an industry, we'll have to be able to adapt and be flexible and come up with fairly quick solutions as to, in response to either government policy around taxation, business strategy around parking, all of those sorts of things. But it will change because, you know, as I said, it's not going to be the one person going to the same office 5 days in a row each week.
Yeah, this is very fascinating, a very extremely interesting concept, Stuart, as you said. Now, we're getting into the last section in terms of what would be your recommendations. Seeing what you have been seeing, what would be your recommendation for the industry peers in Australia and you know, worldwide in terms of the folks in the park industry? What should we be paying attention to, and how should we think about
I think what we'll be paying attention to is the use of technology at probably three levels. And it won't be necessarily at the payment level, because as I said, Australia is such a tap and go society. I think that will just be cemented a little bit further, but it's already pretty much a given in the way that people will pay. What I think you will find is that local governments or councils that have not implemented pay by phone apps for on-street parking will do so as a response to COVID. If not, we may even see some further technology change or policy changes around what we call multi-use vendors, where it's just not one company. There might be, like in Holland, a couple or three or four or even five companies that are offering pay by phone services on street. We may see that in the next 12 months. And then I also think we'll see an increase in technology at that company level should companies go and book parking to share that with their employees. And I think from that side, it's going to be very interesting to have a platform which will be a B2B platform where a corporation, it won't necessarily be the building, but it'll be the corporation will adopt someone's platform to manage the car parking in their office building.
Right. Wow. So essentially you're saying while a lot of things are changing, if I understand correctly, there are opportunities, and the things we need to pay attention to are the changes, and then essentially come up with ways to capture those new potential needs and demand. One being the mobile movement on the street, the other being kind of the corporation monthly parking changes in the off-street area. Is that?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm just going to go to this last slide here where we Parking Australia have a code-safe parking app, but we've also got a concept which is come up fairly quickly called Pimp Up My Car Park. And it's where we're in it, and it's not just Parking Australia, because I know of two large parking operators that are really looking at the alternative use of car parks. Now, you may not be, if your parking facility is full 100% of the time by cars, you're not going to think about your alternative use. But we know that things change. We know that some car parks are used Monday to Friday, but are free on Friday, on Saturday and Sunday, or they're open. They're not full at night. We know that car parks are not usually full 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So we as an industry, and I know there's different players, are talking about this alternative use. Yes, we can get very focused on we want cars in that spot 100% of the time, but we know that's not going to always be the case.
Right.
So the opportunities are, as we've talked about for most of this session, around the car parks, but there will be alternative uses. And I'm going to share, I know we're running out of time, I'm going to share one quick one with you. Halloween's coming up. Now, there is an events company that is looking at running a little festival called Spooktopia. And because of COVID, I don't know if people have been to fairs or shows where you got onto the ride called a ghost train, and you hopped on the ghost train and went through this amusement park ride. Well, it's the same concept, but in a car park. A family drive, you wind down the window, they get thrown in a box of stuff to do with Halloween, and you drive to the car park in a Spooktopia sort of way. So maybe they paid $30 for their entry for their car, and off they go. I mean, there's just an idea about potential use of a car park for an event on a weekend, when traditionally maybe that car park on a weekend is not anywhere near capacity. I like the idea of Spooktopia in a car park on a weekend when it's not there. Monday to Friday it might have cars, and then Friday night the Spooktopia team come in, deck it out, and first thing Saturday morning, families drive in for their Halloween experience on Saturday and Sunday, and Saturday night, and then Sunday night they pull it all down, and then back Monday morning, in come the cars. So I think we can only be limited by our imagination. There are alternative uses where we just probably haven't thought about it in the past because we've never needed to.
Stuart, I couldn't agree with you more. I'd say this is the time for us to think out of the box, to go creative. And as you said, and then at the end of the day, yes, we want more cars, but there are so many things we could try and do, and we just gotta be willing to go through the trials and then to do something different. At the end of the day, it's whatever the customers want, and the sky's the limit. I agree with you. Only thing limit us is information.
This is where I think that we as an industry haven't had to. So this is not criticism. We haven't had to look outside the square. And you think about it, you have a very specific group of skills, of which we've been very good at refining and using technology, and we have these, it's in some ways it's a narrow view because that's what we've been good at, and that's what we've refined and we've got better at over time.
Yeah.
As happens in the technology area especially, it's all about going to be partnering with the right groups. So you may have a car park facility, but you're not an event organizer.
Yeah.
So you don't want to just partner with someone who doesn't know what they're doing in events. You want to partner in events with someone who knows about the health and safety laws, traffic laws, who have done that at different venues.
Mm-hmm.
And partnering with people with the right skill set in the right area is going to be crucial, because as we know, car parks and pedestrians and cars, and if you're having events with alcohol, there's too many risk factors which I think people have stopped them from doing alternative uses. And hopefully, I think it will happen. I think next year we're going to be just seeing some events on top of rooftop car parks in Melbourne and Sydney and around the country, and hopefully we can show the world how it's done.
Yeah, I would love to talk about it then with you again, and then show those amazing events and pictures through our sessions later on to our industry peers here in the US or around the world. Thank you so much, Stuart. Really, really appreciate you sharing all your insights and the data and stories with us. This is amazing. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
All right, thank you. If you're interested in participating in more of this kind of sessions in future, please subscribe our newsletter on smarking.com. Pretty much on a monthly basis, we're hosting webinars to gather the latest and the best insights from the industry. All right, thank you.